Well, welcome. Tonight, we're going to meet somebody who has a very large impact on our lives. But yet, the commission she serves on is not known to most of us. So why don't we start with an introduction?
Well, thank you, Al, and thank you for having me on your show. And for those that don't know, my name is Kimberly Roy. I'm a Cannabis Control Commission for the Cannabis Control Commission. So I've just celebrated my 1 year anniversary as a commissioner. So this is very appropriate to come and discuss issues in the cannabis space and to appear on your show. So thank you so much, Al, for having me.
Well, you're new to the Cannabis Commission, but familiar face. I can't remember how many years ago you first started coming on.
Yeah, it's been a while. I'd say at least 10.
And then with the sheriff's office.
Yeah, so prior to being a commissioner, I worked for the Worcester County Sheriff's Department where I had many roles. I was the director of external affairs and the communications director. And what does that mean? I oversaw all the community outreach programs that the Sheriff's Department did, as well as all the communications. So any press that came out of the jail, house of correction, or community base, I wrote that press releases. I worked with the sheriff on his messaging and his community outreach and handled all under my purview, the social media, website. We created both the Sheriff Evangelitis, who is the Worcester County Sheriff. We created a curriculum, Al, that was for substance use prevention with young people. It was called Face to Face. I co-authored it with Sheriff Evangelitis. What we did is we listened to the inmates, and almost 90% of inmates, sadly, are incarcerated due to substance use disorder issues, mental health, co-occurring disorders. So they told us, we wish we had the information when we were in middle and high school to make better choices and less destructive choices, but we believed the myths. So we listened to them and we created a face-to-face curriculum, which talks about how do you end up in prison? Well, drugs and alcohol can be a direct path to prison or even worse. So it's highly innovative. It uses celebrities, it uses athletes, and we personally brought that in front of almost 400,000 middle and high school students. And we know we changed behaviors and impacted lives. When vaping first came out, juuling, a lot of folks didn't know. Parents didn't know what juuling was. Now, everybody's heard of vaping now and juuling, but back then, no one had heard of it except the young people who were very wise to it. So we're very proud. We took the lead on that. We went into the schools. We talked with the Department of Public Health, and we really took the lead on bringing awareness around the dangers of. And back then, there wasn't the age restrictions as there are now with vaping pens. So we're really proud of the work that we did there. Prior to that, for the Sheriff's Department, I was a stay-at-home mom to raise. I have a son and a daughter and a husband, and I stayed home about a decade. And then prior to that, I worked for Johnson and Johnson, which is a world-class healthcare company, and I worked for them in the analgesic anti-infective division. And I was in major teaching hospitals, providing much needed resources and samples to indigent patients, as well as clinical information to providers. So all of those things assisted me in some way and prepared me in some way to be a cannabis control commissioner today. And I'm very grateful to Governor Baker. I am his appointee, and we can probably talk a little bit more about what the commission is comprised of and what a commissioner does.
What is the CCC? I mean, what does it actually
Sure.
control?
Okay, so the CCC stands for the Cannabis Control Commission, and it is a statutorily mandated. We oversee the cannabis industry in Massachusetts, and that's both the medical side of the ledger and the adult use side of the ledger. Now, there's a timeline with the history of cannabis in Massachusetts really kind of goes back, and probably before, but current history, 2008 is when the decriminalization efforts started, where certain amounts were no longer considered criminal at that point. And then 2012, medical use got approved on the ballot in 2012. And then question 4 in 2016 was adult use, or some folks refer to as recreational use. marijuana, which was approved by the voters. It was a very close vote, but nonetheless, it was approved. The voters spoke. It was approved. So the legislature reworked the language in that law, in that bill, in the law, and also decided that they were going to create a cannabis control commission to oversee all the licensing and all the regulations and everything that goes around the cannabis space and the legal cannabis space. So in 2017, the first cohort of commissioners were put together. There's 5 commissioners. All the commissioners have a different role, if you will, a lane of focus and a different appointing authority. So for me, Governor Baker is my appointing authority, and I sit in the public health seat. There's also a public safety seat, there's a social equity seat, a finance seat, and an industry seat. So all the commissioners kind of have, although we regulate everything together, we each have a unique focus within that. So commissioners, what we do as commissioners is, in addition to meeting once a month, we have public meeting, which is for those folks that have watched it, God bless you, it can be like 6-7 hour meeting. And we review all the licenses that come before us. So prior to public meeting, we get what's called a meeting book, where it has thousands of pages of documents, and we review them. And as a commissioner, if I see that the Al Carrere license, I have a question, or something that I see is amiss, then I, as a commissioner, can put a condition on your license that you have to make sure you fulfill that in order to proceed in the licensing pipeline, if you will. So there's different stages of licensing. So provisional licenses come before us. We give it provisional. That's the first step besides applying. So if I really want to backtrack, Al, if somebody's interested in becoming a business person in the cannabis space, and there's different license types, whether it's cultivation, retail, product manufacturing, delivering, independent testing labs, there's all different types of license types. The first step is to have an agreement with your community. So in Milford, you'd have to have a host community agreement where you fit their zoning, you fit all the requirements required by that municipality. You have that in hand, you have to turn around, then you can begin to apply with the Cannabis Control Commission for your application. And we really do a thorough job. Our investigations, our licensing team, compliance officers, and we've really expedited the process. Where, as opposed to when the commission first got off the ground, the process was a little slower at that point. It's much quicker now, and then you hear from us right away. So it does take time, though, because there are a number of documents that you have to provide the commission. There has to be suitability, has to be, make sure that there's no suitability issues. And, once we get all those documents and you have your operating plans and all of your plans in place and a certificate of good standing and everything that we require of you is in place, then you come before the commissioners, and we decide if we will grant you a provisional license. So that provisional license is a big step for someone in the cannabis space. And then they move forward towards final licensing. So we may have put conditions. So in order to get to the next step, that prospective licensee, if you will, needs to fulfill those conditions.
So if I want to get into any of the 5 areas, I first have to get approval. I pick a town, Milford.
Yes.
And I got to get Milford to approve that they want me here.
Correct. Now, some towns are no towns. Some towns have only certain license types. Yep. And you just have to inquire with that specific municipality.
I remember when we were debating whether or not we were going to have a retail store.
Right.
One of the things that came up is we already had 2 companies in Milford in the cannabis space.
It's independent testing lab.
One independent testing lab.
And a product manufacturer.
And
cultivation. Cultivation. Right.
And they had both been very, very solid citizens. Mm-hmm. Our testing lab, I feel a lot of pride in the fact that when you look at what the owner offers, he's a straight shooter. many times I remember when the testing was for 50 pesticides, all were banned. Some of the labs in the state only tested for 10.
Mm-hmm.
And he would say, no, I'm going to test for all of them. So he would turn away business from his company if it meant compromising the quality standards.
Mm-hmm.
So we ended up voting no against the stores.
I know. I did read that.
But both of them were solid citizens for the town.
Right. That generate tax revenue for the town, and then the revenue from the host community agreement, because there is a revenue that the town does, the municipality does receive from that.
Yeah, but the revenue really didn't play a big role for us.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I feel proud that we had a company come in and offer us $1 billion worth of investment and $30 million a year if they could put a casino here.
Mm-hmm.
And the town just said no.
I remember that too. Yeah.
You know, Milford's unique that way.
It is unique that way.
I remember being told, well, Milford will be better. And I said, but wait a minute, I like Milford the way it is. It'll be different. And we're not really looking for different. It's a nice little town where we take a lot of pride in it, and stick $1 billion casino in the end. So, you know, whatever the cannabis revenue was going to be, wasn't going to be $30 million a year.
No. And as far as the independent testing labs, and I have toured that one that you referred to, that it's important we have independent testing labs. And we have about 8 now that have commenced operations, because not only do they help with the supply chain, but they also ensure that consumers of cannabis, whether it's a medical patient or an adult use, they know that their cannabis has been fully tested. And Massachusetts has the most stringent testing protocol in America for cannabis, whether it's testing for pesticides or heavy metals or mycotoxins or mold and mildew, whatever it is, you know that your product has been thoroughly tested, so it is a safe product as far as that goes.
Yeah, and from the science side, I got to interface with Chris Hodela over at Proverde on the science, and I was really proud at the quality level and what he did. You know, he gave up business, but he wasn't going to cut corners.
He wasn't going to compromise what he thought he needed to test.
It's a good place to be in as a town, to have 2 high quality companies who care about the town.
Who care about their community. And that's a big part, back to what you asked about what commissioners do and the commission does. So part of what we also look at is a positive impact plan and a diversity plan, because we want to have a safe and effective and equitable cannabis industry in Massachusetts. So we want to make sure the product's safe. And we also want to make sure that folks that were previously penalized or harmed by prohibition of marijuana have every opportunity to get into what's a legal market now that people are profiting from. So we have a social equity program. We have a social equity mandate that we need to fulfill at the commission. We have economic empowerment candidates. And those, we have a social equity program, and folks that enter that program, if they qualify for that program, that helps them get ahead in the queue for review. It helps with waiving some fees. It provides technical assistance to them, because there are a lot of barriers to entry with cannabis, let's be honest, because of the federal illegality, Al. There is no banking to speak of. You can't go to your local corner bank and get a small business loan. That's not happening. So what do folks do? They have to raise capital. And it's significant amount of capital to be able to get in this space. And some license types require less capital, but I mean, cultivation requires, or labs require, a significant amount of capital to get in this space. So we provide every opportunity to make sure that we have an equitable marketplace, so folks that were disproportionately harmed in communities that were more harmed than other communities have every availability to them to be able to enter in and be successful in the cannabis industry. We also look at regulations. So there are literally, between the statutes and the regulations, thousands of pages. So as a commissioner, we need to know them. And what we do is we listen to constituents and licensees, and we listen to what's going on in the marketplace. And when the regulations open. Then as commissioners, we decide which ones, if any, we want to rewrite, revise, or tackle whatever, regulations that need updating. So we also do that as commissioners, and we also respond to what's going on. So during COVID, we as a commission voted to extend curbside pickup for medical patients. So we extended that twice now. So if you have an order, you're a medical patient, you could be a cancer patient, you could be, have a serious illness, and you don't feel comfortable going into the medical treatment center, we provided curbside delivery for those folks. Another thing we did was extend telehealth. So in order to become a cannabis patient, you need to get to be a certified patient, and you need to see a certified provider that's recognized by the commission. So in order to do that, you have to have a visit. You need to establish a relationship with a healthcare provider, whether it's a nurse practitioner, a doctor, or a physician's assistant.
So not all doctors can prescribe medical marijuana.
No, as a matter of fact, and if anybody watches public meeting, I speak about this quite often. So as of today, there are about 102,000 certified medical cannabis patients in Massachusetts. So over 100,000. But there are only 402 certified providers, doctors, nurse practitioners, and physician's assistants that are recognized to prescribe cannabis to the patient. So it's kind of like an inequitable ratio. It's working, but it's staggering to think 400 doctors are tending to the needs of over 100,000 patients around
But
cannabis.
those 100,000 patients are not being diagnosed and treated by somebody with no training. You're going to have to go through training.
Yes, you have to be board certified. You have to be a physician or board certified nurse practitioner or physician assistant, and you apply to the commission to be certified by the commission as well. So, right. So my mom, let's just use my mom for an example. Her primary care physician is certified by the commission. So my mother has autoimmune issues, and she talked to him about it, and they talked about the benefits and the risks to cannabis treatment. And my mom does tincture under her tongue for her autoimmune disease, and they decided that was appropriate for her. So for anybody listening to this show, that's a conversation that you have to have with your healthcare provider. You start with your healthcare provider, and if your healthcare provider is not certified by the Cannabis Control Commission, they can refer you to a physician that is. And your healthcare provider ultimately needs to help you decide if cannabis is an appropriate clinical option for you to treat whatever malady you may have.
And if I remember right, I mean, when we grew up, there was pot. That was it. It was cannabis, all the same, which wasn't. Nobody knew. Today, there's many strains. So my understanding is genetic engineering has occurred to where I can get medical marijuana without the high THC content. So I can take it to help me without getting high.
Okay, let's unpack that a little bit. So, yes, it's not, how do I say this? It's not your grandparents' marijuana. That THC potencies have gone up significantly. And there's potency caps on the adult side, but there's no potency caps on the medical side. Now, why is that? Because if someone has, let's say, excruciating cancer pain or any kind of pain, their provider wants to be able to provide the most efficacious medicine for them. So we couldn't really put a limit on the medical side of the equation. But you're right, it comes in many different forms now, right? So edibles or tinctures or solves or you name it. And what I highly recommend is anybody that is a consumer or is thinking about being a consumer or medical patient, the first thing I'm going to say is if you're going to consume safely and responsibly, because it is illegal in the state of Massachusetts to drive while impaired. So let's just start with that.
How can you figure that one out, though? I mean, if I'm drinking, I've got a breathalyzer.
Right. Well, the
If I'm
science isn't,
smoking,
so that's where the science perhaps is not settled where folks would like it. So really, folks really need to be prudent and not get behind the wheel. If, for instance, edibles, there's a delayed onset for a gummy, and it can kick in 2 hours because it gets absorbed through the stomach. So you may eat a gummy and say it's not working on me, but in 2 hours it's going to be working on you. So these are things that patients, consumers need to know. And if you're an adult or, as they say, recreational user, then it's really a talk that you should have at your dispensary with the bud tender. And there's always consumer education, and we highly advocate you start slow and you go low. And there's you had mentioned about not getting high or getting high. There's other products. If you go on the CCC website in the product catalog, or you go to your local dispensary, they do have products with CBD and THC, which kind of mitigate that end of the high feeling, if you will. But that's really a talk, and I can't stress this enough, to have with your doctor. And if you are an adult use consumer, really to do your research and to talk to your local dispensary to get the more information you have, the better. There's more than just the THC. There's the terpene profile, which gives that either some different smells, if you will, or lemon or blueberry, or they have different names. So that comes from the terpene profile, and all of our bodies have thousands of cannabinoid receptor sites. So it's really it's really complex, and it really is a science, and it's really a talk that needs to be had with your provider or your
but Kim,
dispenser.
even something like gummies,
Mm-hmm.
if I remember right, there's different ways of producing them. Some just get sprayed on the surface. Some get melted down, and the active is put in with it, so it's throughout.
So all of the products need to have homogenization, so that one end of the gummy isn't loaded with it all and the other end has zero. So that's in the regulations, that it has to have, they need to be homogenized. So you're getting, to the best possible ability, you're getting equal amounts in the entire serving, if you will. And that's also capped. It's the THC, so it's capped, and the servings are capped, and that's capped. So we try to put safeguards in place to prevent that. Now, for people that product manufacture at home, which we don't really necessarily encourage, how do they ensure homogenization through a brownie or whatever it may be, right? So, and there's many different products out there now, seltzers, ice cream, like there's more products than you even realize. If you go to the product catalog on the CCC website, you will see them.
Ice cream?
Yes, and I'm not advocating. I'm just here
No,
sharing information. That's all.
That's amazing.
Yes. So those are some of the things that the commission tackles. For me personally, public awareness is very important to me, having worked at a correctional facility and with incarcerated individuals in the prevention curriculum I worked on at the Sheriff's Department. For me personally, and I'm not speaking on behalf of the entire commission, but just me and the Public Health Commissioner Roy speaking, is I've focused heavily on prevention and education with our youth. It is illegal in Massachusetts for any licensee to sell cannabis to anyone younger than 21 years of age. It is illegal to advertise. It goes against our regs to advertise if you know that over 85% is, or I should say over 15% is under 21 years of age. So you can't even market.
So it can't be like the cigarettes with the menthol marketing.
Yeah, I think we learned in the past that really they targeted certain age groups. They wanted to get folks hooked at an early age because they knew they would probably have them for life. And so we go really out of our way to make sure there is no diversion to young people, that cannabis is not marketed to young people, and that the packaging is like, we laugh, it's almost adult proof because it's so child resistant that a lot of adults say they can't open it, which is a good thing, that we need it to be child resistant. But even after all of that and saying all of that, we highly encourage folks that consume, please lock up your products when not in use. Accidental ingestions and poisonings with toddlers and children is at an all-time high.
But any medicine, even pharmaceuticals,
That's right. You
you know,
treat it like that. You treat it like poisons or medicines. You have to treat your cannabis the same way. It has to be locked up, and as your kids get older and they get more creative, you have to get more creative on how it is that you lock it up so your teenagers then aren't getting into your cannabis.
but that would, again, it just shocked me to say, as a responsible parent, I should know the therapeutic levels to say, okay, below this, no efficacy, no use. Above this, I mean, retinol can be toxic at a certain, you say, well, I take it as vitamin. Yeah, in a small dose.
Right.
You get some little kid to
Can't
grab
take
a
vitamin
bottle.
A at a high dose.
Right. But if a little kid got a hold of a bottle and starts chugging it
Mm-hmm.
because they think they're candy,
Right.
it
Right.
just amazes me that I guess you have to tell certain people to be careful.
Well, it's happening. So, and I recently had a meeting with the Department of Public Health to discuss how do we bring more awareness around this issue. It is a problem. It is happening. When a toddler sees a gummy or a chocolate bar, do they know that they're not reading yet. They can't see warning labels on, or they can't read warning labels on it. So really the burden is on the parent or the caretaker or whoever is the adult to make sure that their cannabis is safely and securely stored at all times.
Because gummy bears, you could have regular gummies.
Exactly. And who would know that
This is
THC
a treated
is
gummy
used?
versus
You're
a
right.
candy gummy.
Exactly. So that's part of what I work on as well, with public awareness around prevention and safe storage and, even home cultivation for home cultivators out there that, there's certain lights that you should use and certain ventilation you should have. And what I highly encourage folks is to go to the Cannabis Control Commission website. There's a section called More About MJ that really talks about all of these things I just listed with you, as well as home cultivation as well, and safe storage, and just a conversation. If you are a patient, how do you have this conversation with your child about appropriate cannabis use? So there's conversation starters as well. So we highly encourage folks to look
Is
at
home
it.
cultivation a big thing?
I don't know if big is the right word, but it is a thing, and folks are allowed to have 6 plants for one adult and up to 12 for 2 adults in the home. So, and then there's extenuating circumstances where there's hardship cultivation, and you have to apply for a waiver for that. But there are definitely folks that do cultivation. It exists. Yes.
I was going to say, I mean, by the time you buy the grow lights and everything to go in, I would think it'd be easier just to go down and buy it.
Yeah, but everyone's different, and there are definitely home cultivators out there for sure, no question. But to your point you brought up a little while ago, Al, is with the illicit market, you don't know what you're getting. So we tell folks that when you go into a licensee, a dispensary, all of those products have been rigorously tested. And you don't necessarily know in the black market and the legacy market what you're getting.
But don't you, Kim? I mean, using pesticides to grow the plants, you're going to get a 30 to 40% better yield. Now, Charlie, the drug dealer, I don't know that that person's real worried about the fact
About
that he's
organic
selling
farming.
you. Yes, that he's selling you,
Certified organic. Oh, I know.
pesticide covered weed.
That's my point.
So I sit there and I say, I don't believe for a moment that somebody that's selling illegally is going to worry about regulations.
It's probably accurate statement.
So if you're going to smoke, then at least use your head. I mean, one of the biggest benefits I saw when we were debating making marijuana legal was it was kind of like the lottery. When we were growing up as kids, everything was under the table bookies.
Right.
The minute they came out with the lottery, they sucked a huge amount of money right out of organized crime. I got to believe we're doing the same thing here.
One would hope. It's tricky to get any empirical data on the illicit market, but anecdotally,
Charlie the drug dealer, could you give me
you
your
give me run a
revenue?
report and let us know if your business is up or down and how much and how. So it is a tricky thing to quantify, but the hope is that more and more folks realize that at the end of the day, you would want to consume a safe product that you know is safe and tested, and we try to convey that, constantly in everything you can. We monitor cannabis plants from seed to sale. So there's a system that's a metric system that every plant is entered. It has a individual. It's like its own social security number. It's from birth. They get tagged and they get followed through the lifespan of that plant to sale. So it is all in the system, and even disposal of, let's say, clippings or marijuana, that's recorded as well. So and it has to be disposed of properly.
I was going to say, how do you get rid? You can't burn it.
No,
It's not like you're taking your trash
no,
and you're going to take it out back and burn it.
no. So you have to render it unusable. And how do you do that? Well, there's different medium that can help. So kitty litter is an example. If you mix it with kitty litter, you render the cannabis unusable at that point. Now, I went on a tour, and I'm glad to share this, that one of the cultivators that I went on a tour takes all of their waste and they convert it to compost. So they mix it with, they have a special pellet or chip or whatever that they grind it up with, and all of their waste turns around and goes back into the earth as compost. Now, what an amazing idea that is to do that.
It comes down to, we talked about Pro Verde, Michael over at Sierra, Natural. Everybody that was against marijuana said if these people are in our town, it'll cause all these problems. Here it is years
And
later.
you haven't seen that, right?
The only thing I've seen is these companies donating to the Milford Medical Center, helping out kids programs.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, okay. So if they're good people to begin with, they stay that way. Because we haven't seen anything.
No, that's great. As a commissioner, that's always great to hear, and I'm thankful to hear that. And I'm glad to see that they also give back to the communities, because that's part of the mission. So for all of our licensees, part of their mission is to positively impact their community that they're in, or surrounding communities, identified communities that have been disproportionately impacted by incarceration and arrest and conviction. We want our licensees to give back to those communities. So it's great as a commissioner to hear when you're citing instances of them giving back to the community, as well as that they're good stewards and good business
that
people
came
in the
up
community.
in the initial where it's like, why don't we hear that you're sponsoring Little League teams? And one of the owners said, well, we didn't think it would be appropriate, so we've been laying low. So they came back and came out with donations to help different kids in the town. So you're not walking around with a pot plant on your chest.
You can't. That's against the regulations.
Oh,
so
okay.
we can't do that.
But, it was nice to hear that they're going to, Michael's put up so much money every year for so many years to help the town. I thought that was cool.
Yeah, and not only help the towns, but help the Commonwealth as a whole. That excise tax has now this is something. So the first legal cannabis on the adult side was sold in the fall of 2019. And here we are in the summer of 2022, and it's over a $3 billion industry. That's billion with a B in sales. And excise tax for cannabis is now outpacing alcohol. Now think about that for a second. So there's package stores, restaurants without liquor license, every corner, all over the place, and there aren't that many dispensaries, but cannabis excise tax is outpacing alcohol.
Has it met the goals? I mean, when you first started talking about legalizing marijuana, people said it's going to bring in so much money.
Right.
Has the reality lived up to the projections?
So I wasn't a commissioner at that time, and I don't know if there was a set number that folks anticipated, but I know that the sales have been robust, and I know that the tax revenue has been quite a boon for the state house to have those funds in the marijuana regulation fund to turn around and help communities with. So it's definitely a tax revenue generator that has helped not only local communities, but has gone into the general fund, if you will, and gone on to help the state as a whole. So it really
Well,
has
but
made an
again,
impact.
I go back to, you think of prohibition. People who wanted to drink were going to drink.
Right, they were going to find a way.
And what you were doing is donating directly to the Send Al Capone to Camp Fund. So again, people who are going to smoke are going to smoke.
Mm-hmm.
But boy, I like the idea of them giving the money to the state to be used for schools and everything else versus Charlie the drug dealer.
Right, where there's no tax revenue generated from that sale. And you don't know what's in the product necessarily that you're getting. So,
How do you deal with the secondary issues? Like when I think of vaping,
mm-hmm.
I remember reading the poisoning by heavy metals that was coming off the heating elements.
Yes.
Does that come under your control too, or?
So when that health emergency happened, Governor Baker reacted swiftly, as well as the commission, and there was a cease and desist on all sales for a period of time till we could analyze and figure out what was causing this lung problem, and the vitamin E acetate and the heavy metals. So the commission really came to the forefront, and everything was tested. Licensees were not able to sell those products during that time. So part of the mission of the Cannabis Control Commission is to uphold public health, public safety, and public welfare. And when people are getting critically ill with lung disease from these vaping elements, then the commission's responsibility is to figure out why. And we did that at the time. And those products were then removed. And then after it was discovered what was causing it, then sales were able to resume again once those products that were causing the lung problems.
That's one of the problems when you have somebody like your commission and Charlie Baker, that they keep their promises. When they said, we're going to deal with the safety element first, boy, you seem to jump on that really fast.
That's right. And we should, because how can folks have confidence in the legal market if we're not responsive to public health crisis and public health emergencies, and if we don't have safe products? What's the point of having a legal market? So we want to ensure that all of those things are in place, so consumers and patients can feel safe and confident when they purchase products in Massachusetts.
Now, you control all the aspects in Massachusetts.
Correct.
You got 5 other states within an hour. How does our laws tie to New Hampshire, Vermont, Maine?
Sure. So for a while there, as you may know, Massachusetts was the first state east of the Mississippi to legalize adult use. So we really had a head start or a jump on all the other surrounding states. Many states look to Massachusetts for guidance as they come online with legal cannabis industry. New York coming online, Rhode Island, I think Vermont. There's states around that are coming online. It is illegal to transport cannabis across state lines. It is illegal to mail cannabis. It is illegal to get on a plane with it and fly. So you cannot, for instance, the islands, Nantucket and Martha's Vineyard, they have to test their own products. They can't, because they can't go on the ferry because those are federal waters. So federally, cannabis is illegal. It's a Schedule 1. So they have to test everything on the island. They can't bring it back and forth.
Well, I remember when places in Vermont and all wanted to send samples to UMass for testing. And they couldn't.
It can't, because you can't have interstate. There's no interstate commerce right now because of the federal illegality of it. Now, is there tourism, cannabis tourism? Sure is. I've seen it. Now, where they're consuming? Well, hopefully it's in Massachusetts, because if they bought it in Massachusetts,
You gotta
they
smoke it
should be consuming it in Massachusetts. So there definitely is cannabis tourism. Now, whether that abates a little bit because of more states, contiguous states around Massachusetts coming online with cannabis, we'll see. But that definitely is.
So Massachusetts is legal. What other states around us?
Rhode Island is, Rhode Island is legal. I think they're going to have a lottery system on their licensees. New York, now they're not up and running yet. Some of these states, they're just in the formative phase of it right now. So, New Hampshire is no. Maine, I'm not. I know Maine has an industry. I'm not sure to what extent, but there are definitely states around us more and more that are. New Jersey now has
Now,
it.
one of the things I remember reading about
Connecticut has it.
is the difficulty legal retail stores had with doing banking. Because
Right.
places like Citibank, Chase wouldn't touch them because they
Right.
were breaking federal laws.
Right.
What
So
do you do? I mean, we read about these Brinks trucks running around moving money at different hours to, because, you know, if I'm a bad guy and I know you've got millions of dollars of cash, it's got to be a target.
So a lot of dispensaries, what I'm hearing, try to do a lot of cashless transactions, and there's platforms that and I'm not 1,000% versed in all of them, but there are different platforms which, for instance, like a preloaded card, where you have a preloaded amount of money on a card, and then you go and turn around and you use that card at a dispensary. So technology is getting to the point where there's folks are getting creative with cashless transactions, and they're seeing more and more of them to eliminate the chance of that scenario you just described with the Brinks truck. We want to avoid anything like that. So we are seeing more cashless transactions than anything at these dispensaries.
But the cashless transactions, they have to be a system inside of Massachusetts
It's a
only?
system. Well, I don't have the technical prowess on exactly how these platforms work, but there are platforms, and maybe at some point we can bring someone in to talk about them. And I don't, as a commissioner, I don't really want to advocate for one over the other or say. But
But I'm just curious because I use Citibank. Well, I'm not sure where my Citibank is.
Right.
I just flip my card, and somewhere in the United States, they're processing my purchase. So you wonder, how do you know? But they must know because they're not going to risk violating federal law.
No, they're not going to risk. And that's part of what Congress really needs to take up. The United States Congress is when and if they do deschedule it or make it federally legal. They really need to take a holistic approach to it. It's not just decriminalizing or descheduling it. It's looking at banking. It's looking at interstate commerce. It's looking at all of these things and taking all of these things into account. That how do you protect what we've done in Massachusetts, where the smaller vendors, where the folks of communities that were disproportionately harmed have a business, and if it's federally legal, what's an unintended consequence? Well, that what they call MSOs or multi-state operators could come in and gobble things up, right? So Congress, when and if they do act, and research, how do we handle research around cannabis and how it helps on the medical side? Research is so limited right now because of that. There's only one university, and it's in Mississippi, that can even grow the cannabis to research it. And imagine the research dollars that would come in down the road if that is ever federally legal cannabis is. But unintended consequences need to be looked at as well when and if that ever happens. And who knows? I don't know.
We did a project in the lab where we tested a device for spraying CBD.
Okay.
But people had no idea. If you're going to test a nasal spray, there's so many out there. We know all the rules. The FDA's laid down their guidances. But when it came down to a CBD oil, they had no clue.
So that is under the Department of Agriculture, and in Massachusetts, on the Massachusetts Department, hemp falls under the purview of the Massachusetts Department of Agriculture. Now, the commission has had an extraordinary working relationship with MDAR and really have gone full steam ahead to be able to listen to our hemp farmers. And I, as a commissioner myself, I've met with hemp farmers and to get them into this space because there is a demand for those products. So they are in the cannabis space now as far as being able to sell to our dispensaries and get the products infused. And but you're right, that's a whole that's another lane, right? That's a whole different lane with that.
What is hemp?
Right.
I'm amazed how many people have no clue.
Yeah, so it is a flower and it has less THC. It can only have a certain amount of THC in it, so you don't get the high, if you will, or the psychoaffective, I guess, feeling you get with THC. So it's only a certain amount that it can't have higher than that, and it's becoming more and more popular from anecdotally what I can tell.
I laughed when I heard the hemp testing market, how it had blossomed, because
Which
person-
they do over here, yes.
the person buying the hemp doesn't trust the person selling the hemp, so they have it tested. Then the person processing the hemp to make it into an oil has to test it.
See how well tested the product is,
The
Al?
person buying the oil doesn't trust the person processing it, so they have it tested. And I laughed because then it's like the gummy bears. Some of it's sprayed on, some of it's, I guess, infused by melting the gummy and then reconstituting it.
Either way, it should be homogenized through the product.
But all of a sudden, you're testing the same hemp 6 times. So, yeah, it feels like it really is getting tested pretty thoroughly.
It is getting tested thoroughly. And another thing the commission is really proud of is our transparency and open data. So for anybody watching this show and has any questions about anything, truly, we have a product catalog. Now, why would we have a product catalog on our website? Well, because of the illicit market, because kids may bring something we had a situation where a high school student brought a candy bar to school, and the school resource officer and the local PD were able to determine that it came from the illicit market and not one of our licensees based on that product catalog. So for folks wanting to learn more about the products, they're able to see what is a legally recognized product in Massachusetts. We post all the sales data online. We post pricing for like what an ounce is going for. We track everything. We are about transparency, and we share all of that open data with anybody that has access to a computer and can look at it.
So I can look up competitive pricing to say on average it was this high, now it's that.
So it tracks the trends of like what an ounce, and the price has come down some on that. It does track the pricing on that. Now we've also had more retailers commence operations. We've had more cultivators who grow the marijuana. They've commenced operations. We have more. We've only had 1 or 2 labs for a long time. Now we're up to 8. So the product's able to get tested more rapidly. So supply and demand. So we're able to fulfill that. And so I think that's helped alleviate some of the price.
How many out of the 315 whatever towns and cities, how many have, let's say,
More.
medical dispensaries in their town?
Yeah, there's, I believe, 92. It's in the 90s. There are medical treatment centers. Every county has one, including the island. Every county has a medical treatment. So there is access to, and now somebody say, well, why would I want to become a medical patient? Well, why? Well, there is a benefit that you have that talk with your provider if it's an appropriate clinical therapy for you. And once your provider sends in the paperwork to the commission and you fill out your end, you have to prove that you're a resident of Massachusetts with a license or a utility bill, and you do all of that. then you can go to what we call an MTC, or a medical treatment center, and the benefit is not only with the potency caps, but you no longer pay the tax, which is around 20% when you add up the local sales tax, the excise tax, and the local option tax. So for patients, there's quite a savings on the medical side of the ledger when you purchase cannabis.
And how many recreational stores are there? Do you have any idea?
Yeah, so there are, I believe we're up to 90 some odd of those too, but we can get that information.
So it's 1 out of every 3 towns has a store.
Well, you can't extrapolate it that way because some towns are still no towns.
Right, like
Or
Milford.
Some towns, well, Milford's.
Well, we got a medical.
Milford is no to adult use. So you really have to, so that's when we find ourselves with, let's say the city of Worcester that has 40 some, like that's why you find certain pockets where there are more, because folks will say, geez, they're popping up on every corner. Well, not really. It's because certain towns are yes towns and certain towns are no towns, and they're unable to open a cannabis.
But if you've got 40 in Worcester
licenses,
that's.
But they're different license types. So one could be a medical treatment center. We could have cultivators. We could have delivery operators.
okay.
We could have a micro business. We could have.
Are there a lot of cultivators?
Yeah, there's more cultivators coming online, which we're grateful for that, because to be able to fulfill the supply chain, and so we have indoor and outdoor cultivators, mostly indoor because it is New England.
But I was amazed at the amount of money that cultivators have to provide for security.
All licensees have to make sure that their security plans are in full compliance. So whether they're a courier, a delivery operator, a cultivator, a retailer, a product manufacturer, there are strong security requirements in the cannabis industry. Whether it's your cameras cannot have one blind spot, to your where you dispose of it is properly locked, to 2 alarm company systems in place, to working with your local police department, so they know your security plan. So the commission will know it, and licensees should work with their local law enforcement to let them know as well. So those are just a few of the security requirements. Obviously, any product has to be kept in a locked space with only certain individuals have access to that space, and the only product on the sales floor is locked up in cases that are, let's say, a sample on display, right? So that's locked up, and everything else is in a specified area that has to meet specified requirements with the commission.
I was just thinking, if I've got outdoor cultivation, that's a lot of space to protect.
Well, that varies too. So that's called your canopy, where you grow. And there are 11 different levels of canopy, if you will. So 0 to 5,000, 5 to 10, and it works its way up to 110,000. So in the state of Massachusetts, the largest canopy you can have is 110,000 square feet. You can't have, but other states have even less than that. There is a span of cultivators in the different tiers.
So now the commission itself, if you look out and say, this is what we'd like to focus some attention on, what would those areas be?
Well, I can't speak for the commission as a whole, because commissioners have individual priorities, like I shared with you about education and prevention and preventing diversion with our youth. But at the end of the day, we want to ensure public health, public safety, public welfare, and that we have an equitable marketplace, in that we look to the future. So we don't have any research labs yet online, but we have folks who have started the process to begin a research lab. So those are things down the line that we look to in the future, as far as what's in the horizon. We'd hopefully like to see, me personally, I can say on my own behalf, like to see more research around the medical end.
Well, that would make sense, and we certainly have the academic infrastructure.
We sure do in Massachusetts.
To support it.
We sure do. If that relationship could ever fully take off, I think it would be quite a thing.
Well, after being in the biotech industry for too many decades, money will make that happen. If the money starts coming for research grants, professors are very good at identifying funding sources.
Yes, yep. And I think a lot of folks would be highly interested to hear more about research with cannabinoids and terpenes and how it positively can impact the body.
Well, just the idea that you have, I mean, the first time we were asked when I was at a DNA company to do genetic testing of cannabis, it was like, excuse me? Well, they want to know how much THC, how much TLC do you have to put into
To get THC?
to get the
That's a good
THC
question.
at the level you want?
I think there's a lot of TLC that needs to go into THC. And I have said this before, and having visited a number of cultivation facilities, that any farming is a science, Al. It really, truly is a science, from the heating to the cooling to the lights to the water to the media that they plant in. Everything about it truly is a science.
Well, it worries me to think that some people, they want to do 12 plants. And the heat or the lights, that's a lot of electricity going through there.
Mm-hmm.
And if they don't do their homework ahead of
And
time.
have the right bulbs, and right, there could be problems if they're not really up to speed and well versed on how to properly cultivate and grow cannabis.
And protect their own homes. Because,
Exactly.
certainly when you have 15 amp circuits or 30 amp circuits, that doesn't feed many lights.
Well, we even state that on our website, that if you are going to be a home cultivator, we highly recommend that you do it in consultation with a licensed electrician.
What message do you want to leave with our viewers?
I want to leave the message that, number one, that if you are going to consume, please consume safely and responsibly. Please make sure you properly store any cannabis products so children and teenagers aren't getting access to them. I would say that for older Americans, I know a lot of older Americans are opening their minds to cannabis and learning about cannabis and how it can help them. I would just highly recommend that folks do as much research as possible, have that robust conversation with their healthcare provider to make sure it is appropriate clinical option for them. And just keep reading, because this is an exciting, emerging, evolving industry that is, it's provided a lot of not only tax revenue, but it's provided, really has been an economic driver now in Massachusetts, providing a number of thousands and thousands of jobs in the cannabis space as well.
Well, again, I bring back one of the more interesting parts for me is that A, you get a safe product, and B, the revenue is going to helping the community.
That's right.
Not to the illicit drug dealers. So thank you for everything you're doing, and we look
Thank you,
forward to having
Al.
you back and getting more updates.
Well, it was an honor for me to be here, and it would be a pleasure to come back. So thank you very much for having me.
And as always, to our 6 loyal viewers, learn. If you have questions, go and check it out with the Cannabis Control Commission. We're paying them out of our tax money to serve the community, and they want to. And I love the idea of them being transparent, because that helps make informed decisions, one way or another. Not our place to tell you whether or not it's legal. As long as you're doing it safely, then we can't ask for better than that. And as always, may God bless. May tomorrow be a better night than tonight. Good night, all. To our 6 loyal viewers, I appreciate you sitting in.
Not too long since I've been home. Been running all my life just searching for my soul.